You are live.
This is the Senate Transportation Committee. It's Friday, January 26th. We are going to talk about electric rates for electric vehicles, a report that the Public Utility Commission has completed. I think this was from T-bill from few years ago that we asked for this report to be done. So I thought it would be good to have Public Utility Commission in. We also have Mr. Peacock from the Department of Public Service here that worked on it from the Department of Public Services angle. So he can either testify or either answer questions. But I think we're going to have Mr. Howe from the commission just kind of tell us what the report was. So you can introduce yourself and let us know about the report.
Sure. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. Good morning. My name is Micah Howe. I'm a staff attorney at the Public Utility Commission. And as you mentioned, I'm here to speak about the Commission's recent report on electric vehicle rates, which was filed pursuant to Act 55. Act 55 was signed into law on June 3rd, 2021. Section 33 of the Act, which is what our report focuses on, it requires distribution utilities in Vermont to develop and implement rates for electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging equipment by June 30th, 2024. Section 33 also requires the Public Utility Commission to file an annual report on the utility's progress. This year's report was the third of 4 reports and is also the last report that will be filed before the June 30th implementation deadline. So we are several years into this and have much more to talk about this year on progress towards that June 30th deadline. So Section 33 sets out criteria that new EV rates must satisfy, ensuring that the rates are effective both from an economic and an adoption standpoint for electric vehicles. Each year, the Commission undertakes a process to gather information in preparation for the report. This year was no different and involved 2 rounds of written comments from the utilities, as well as 2 workshops to discuss comments and progress. The utilities participated, as did the Department of Public Service. And in the first round, we also had an electric vehicle charging equipment manufacturer, ChargePoint, who participated. As part of that process, we set a deadline of October 16th for utilities to submit their filings to the Public Utility Commission in advance of the June 30th implementation deadline. Our process at the Commission takes several months, potentially for tariff review and approval, so that we had to allow time for that to complete. And as of the filing of the report, all Vermont utilities have filed petitions under Act 55. Some of those are new tariffs. Some of those are requests for exemptions for electric vehicle rates that existed prior to 2021. And then some of those are requests for extensions. In terms of an overview of the filings that we did receive, the Vermont Public Power Authority filed a petition for preliminary review of a new tariff, which would be implemented by its 11 member utilities. The Vermont Public Power Supply Authority represents many smaller muni and town municipal utilities around the area. So their petition involves a single tariff that would then be subsequently implemented by their utilities. The Vermont Electric Cooperative has also filed a new tariff for a residential electric vehicle or a residential electric vehicle tariff that would basically implement what it currently offers as a standalone program not under tariff. We received several exemption requests from utilities that have existing EV rates. That includes Burlington Electric, Green Mountain Power, and Vermont Electric Cooperative also on their industrial side, their commercial tariff. They have all requested exemptions for existing EV rates that have been in place since July 1st, 2021. We received a fourth exemption request from GF Power. GF Power is a relatively new utility that operates to provide power to the Global Foundries campus in Essex. That's the extent of their jurisdiction. They have a single customer, but they were approved as a distribution utility in 2022 and have also sought an exemption for the single rate that they have in place that's approved under their certificate of public good. As far as extensions, we had 3 utilities ask for extensions. One was Stowe Electric. They are in the middle of implementing a enterprise software system that will improve their billing capabilities and their metering capabilities. And they've asked to extend their time to file the tariff until June 30th. So it would result in a tariff being filed, but not implemented by the Act 55 deadline. And that would allow them time to complete their software implementation. Washington Electric has also requested an extension of time to file their EV tariff. Washington Electric is in the planning process for an upgrade to its metering infrastructure. And Washington Electric expects to be able to file a tariff by around March 2025 after it completes its metering infrastructure upgrade. And then finally, Hyde Park Electric has requested a 2-year extension. They've cited similar reasons to Washington Electric, which is upgrading its metering infrastructure as well as evaluating overall its rates and the impact of its metering upgrade on those rates. So based on the filings we got, I don't think it was unexpected at the commission, but there is a range of progress amongst the utilities, with some having had rates in place since 2021, some filing their tariffs, and some needing additional time to upgrade, mostly infrastructure and software upgrades. Based on the petitions filed and the existing requests for exemptions, if all those are approved, not counting the extension requests, the result will be that approximately 95% of Vermont utility customers will have access to an electric vehicle rate through their utility, with that 5% filling out following the completion of the extensions.
And that's by the due date by next June?
That would be by the due date. That's not counting the extension requests.
June is 24. Is that the date?
It's June 30th, 2024.
Could I ask?
We have a question. We have
Yes.
a question. Senator Kitchen.
I'm reading that again. If approved by the commission, the new tariffs filed and the existing tariffs of which exemptions have been requested. So if you grant the requested exemptions, does that change your 95%? I don't know how to read. If the exemptions are not approved, those adding those with the new filed and those that exist, would we be 95%? Or if you grant the exemption request, would we still be at the 95% threshold? I wasn't sure how to read that sentence.
The 95% includes the new tariffs. Without the new tariffs, assuming exemptions are granted for all of the existing tariffs, we're about 77%. So existing electric vehicle tariffs that are available right now, assuming that they meet the Act 55 criteria, those rates are currently available to about 77% of Vermont utility customers.
But you think we'll be at 90% by June of 2024?
It would be 95%. I don't want to speculate on the outcome of those pending cases, but
Yeah.
if everything is approved across the board, it will be 95%.
Okay, so we have exemptions and then we have extensions. That's what I'm struggling with here.
Okay, so
If you
I'm sorry.
grant exemptions, to what extent does that impact the 95% figure that is cited here in the report?
The exemptions are for existing rates, so the 95% includes the exemptions. It doesn't impact the percentage, it is part of the percentage.
That's what I'm trying to, thank you,
Because the exemptions are asking for exempting
because they're already doing it to some.
for specific requirements. They're not asking for an exemption to the law. They're saying we would like an exemption for.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, the exemption, and I framed that poorly. The exemption is an exemption for an existing rate.
Correct. And are there parts of those existing rates that don't comply with the Act 55?
That is something that is under consideration in those cases, so I can't really comment on that. There is an exemption written into the act that basically grandfathers in certain existing rates depending on whether at what point they were implemented.
Okay, and then at the end of your report on the barriers, is that something that you can talk about, or does that get into issues of the cases?
I can talk about the existing barriers. I have a little bit more on that in terms of what continues to be outstanding issues identified by the utilities. So as is reflected in the extension requests, technology continues to be a barrier, particularly metering and software for the utilities. Many of these systems are older and dated and don't have quite the granularity necessary for some of the electric vehicle rate options that are out there. So it's a question of upgrading systems to improve ability, or going with something more generic that doesn't quite rely as heavily on technology. So metering and software are an obstacle that is being addressed by some of the utilities first to expand what is the potential universe of options for EV rates down the road. So for example, Green Mountain Power has a time of use EV rate, and they also have a peak demand rate, which depends on knowing whether people are charging their electric vehicles during those periods. Some of the metering technology that currently exists with some utilities is not capable of doing that. And once that happens, there's also the enterprise software backend issue where in-house they can't discern what charging occurred during what time period. So those are really the metering and software issues. Demand charges did come up quite often, particularly with ChargePoint, the electric vehicle equipment manufacturer. They raised the demand charge issue and included in their comments some of the solutions that have been proposed nationally. Here in Vermont, we do have several utilities that have demand charge free options, including Green Mountain Power, where they have a demand charge exception for electric vehicle charging up to a certain usage threshold. So most of the solutions nationally and that we're seeing here in Vermont are the same, where it's either a demand charge exception or a demand charge holiday. And some approaches use volumetric pricing, where demand charges are just built into the rate itself. But that remains a concern, and one that utilities are continuing to work on. Some utilities said they have not run into the issue due to low usage of the charging equipment, but that is certainly something that will come up more often down the road as EV penetration, electric vehicle penetration increases.
Is the barrier there about cost allocation, or is it about that you would have to change other tariffs, just like there's an extra step?
It is more of a barrier to the the charging equipment, the public charging companies that are offering public charging, and it's a cost issue. And I think
So it's difficult for them to make money with the demand charges in place.
with the demand charges, and certainly Philip can speak more. He has firsthand knowledge of what's going on out there. But our understanding from what we've learned during the investigation is the demand charge that kicks in due to the spike in usage is not outweighed by the actual usage underlying on the charger. So low usage chargers can trigger demand charges, whereas the underlying usage is not high enough to even that cost out. It just becomes a large surcharge.
So right, Mr. Peacock, the barrier is just that it makes it difficult for somebody to kind of make money doing charging because of the demand charge. It's not a technical problem or a rate problem.
I could argue it's a rate problem. Hi, Philip Peacock, Department of Public Service. Yes, it can. I mean, it can be a rate problem because the reality is that in a small, let's take it for example, a small municipal territory, somewhat off the beaten path, so not getting a lot of usage, but when the usage does occur, it's a DC fast charger. It has a big impact relative to the size of the small unique system. That could cause real, it could contribute to high costs if someone happens to be charging at the same time that that system is peaking for the year or for the month. And so there's no good solution. The question is what else, is there a way to say have a rate that ChargePoint or whichever operator would modulate and sort of that peak time of the month or peak time of the year, ramp back charging slightly. But if someone charges at midnight while passing through, they can still get full power and charge up 20 minutes and go.
Okay.
Hope you understood all that.
Yes.
I'm assuming, for example, if you had a small utility and it's a very hot summer day and everybody's running their, their high demand, et cetera, that would be a situation where that would add quite a bit of cost because that utility would probably have to buy high cost
Yes.
Power to supplement what is normally available. I mean, peak cost.
Yes.
Okay.
Or if you had a concentrated area of superchargers, home superchargers, and they all, one street, they all got together and they said, hey, we're all gonna get EVs. And then all of a sudden, they all decide to charge at that one time. It throws everybody else into the surrounding area into a higher rate. Is that correct? Could it do that? I mean, could it create a demand to that area so that it vastly changes the amount you're charging for electricity at one time? Could everybody decide to plug in?
If the it wouldn't happen on a neighborhood basis, it would happen on a utility basis. So let's say it's a small utility serving
Right.
one town.
Right. I'm thinking of Orleans Electric. I mean, all of a sudden everybody. Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
If that charging happened to occur at the same time that there's a statewide or regional peak, that's what drives a lot of the costs.
A lot of those steps utilities. Those 11 utilities are small.
And so the objective of the law ultimately is to have utilities offer incentives to shift demand to low cost times.
Right.
To the benefit of drivers, but also to the benefit of all of the ratepayers.
Okay, Senator Shipman?
So I don't know if you can answer this question, but are we using any broadband power line networking where we're managing the smart grid using communications coming from devices over the power line, or all these technologies requiring an ancillary Wi-Fi network that the managed EV chargers are connecting to, and that's where we're tracking whether or not the devices are actually using during peak hours?
Nearly all of the equipment requires some sort of other communication system. WEC, Washington Electric Co-op, does use Powerline Carrier or Powerline Communication for their billing system, but what they have found is that the quality is questionable, and so they can only track 4 periods per day, which is insufficient. It's insufficient. It could work, but you wouldn't want to rely on it for billing ultimately for revenue. What has happened since that technology was developed, Powerline carrier technology was developed, is that there are many more inverters on the system, so batteries, solar panels, and there's something about the nature of how inverters interact with the grid and the voltage that the communication quality degrades.
Paul, do you see the real solution to getting a smarter grid network to be able to rely on data communications, so addressing just that problem with the inverters dampening the data communications along the same network, so as we're not relying upon the individual consumers configuring all these devices on Wi-Fi networks on who knows which network service?
In part.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it will be the individual consumers, you know, who will connect, if not their chargers to their Wi-Fi, it'll come through the vehicles themselves, through vehicle telematics, which some manufacturers already offer, some automobile manufacturers already offer, and it seems to be the direction that they're going. WEC, Washington Electric Co-op, which I mentioned, they are moving away from the next 3 years, the current AMI system, getting a new AMI system that will allow better billing.
I love the smart car aspect of it, but I really feel like we need to think about all the energy draws in our houses too. I mean, we've got heat pumps, we've got the water heaters that are now electric too, increasing devices too. So we need, I think that my naive perspective is we really need to have data communications on the power lines so that we can manage the load effectively with an increased amount of demands that we're anticipating on the 10-year horizon.
I would say that the general trend in the industry is to move away from Powerline carrier or Powerline communication, just because of reliability issues. I mean, you're sort of trying to send packets of data over a system built for something else.
So, there you go.
Before we get into it, as quickly to what even last year the industry has kind of balked at, which is that we do know when we plug in. We do know when we're drawing demand. We can identify when that usage is coming and where it's coming from. And it's getting there a lot quicker than what even I think the industry thought it could be. But it is very, very possible that we certainly understand, as Senator Chittenden said, having these smart charging systems, we understand where the draw is coming from, who's asking for the draw, just by the signature of the communications that it creates. We are getting to a smart system a lot quicker than what even the industry thought that they would.
Okay. Yeah. Were there any other things that you wanted to specifically highlight for us, Mr. Howe?
There were two other barriers that we addressed, multifamily dwellings, and also not really a barrier, but one topic that received a fair amount of conversation was whole premises time of use rates, where we discussed a lot about how effective they are, whether or not they will meet demands. And this ties into some of the things just spoken about in the comments with other home demands, making them not as specific or useful to EVs. So we had quite a bit of discussion about that, but those were the only other two issues that I was going to bring up.
In the multifamily residence as a barrier, it seems like that's more of a barrier just for EVSE in general, not specifically about this act and rates.
Correct. I don't know. It was something that many utilities raised, particularly in areas where there were ample supply of multi-unit dwellings, and no one has a good solution for that. I don't know that that's a rate solution as much as it would be, as you mentioned, a charging equipment solution.
Right. Okay. And can you remind me, if you happen to know, the fourth report, which I assume is due next year, does that have recommendations in it?
The reports are, at least under the Act, all the same. We have evolved them as progress has been made. I think that will be a status report. My expectation, and it is due January 15th of 2025, that will be more of what utilities have done. Ideally, there will be some more progress made among those that are still working, and maybe even new rates, but it will probably be a summary and will include recommendations based on where we are at that point. It's a rapidly changing area, The technology around EVs changes. Even from 3 years ago with our first report, the capabilities are totally different now and open up new opportunities for the utilities. So I expect that will continue to happen, and at that point we can make some future current recommendations.
Okay. Because I think that this committee, or at least members of the committee, are still interested in the discussion about having a transportation fee connected to electric vehicle charging when at home. And that, when we addressed that a few years ago, just like the technology wasn't there, it would be a small percentage, but it seems like if we're gonna get to 90% that are gonna have these kind of rates, maybe that possibility of a charge, even though I know the utilities don't want to do it, but it might be possible, at least from a technological point of view.
To segregate the
Right.
usage for
Right.
the EV apart from the domestic use.
Right. Does the department have anything to say about that?
I don't have a position on it. I think I remember a couple of years ago, Senator Ingalls asked the question, and I said part of the challenge, especially the small utilities, you're dealing with older billing systems. I won't say they're running on Windows 95, but they're probably created in the 90s or of that era. And so it ultimately comes down to being able to segregate and identify that EV specific load, and how do you get into someone trying to skirt the rules, or applying that universally and fairly.
But there are other examples where we have rules or laws for the utilities that aren't equal amongst all the utilities based on their individual capabilities. Because they're not like, so could you imagine that we would have something where 90% of the customers have access to it, but 10% do not, or are not charged that? Or to be specific about that, where 90% have
they pay a separate fee, or
the 10% that are like Hyde Park customers are like, well, you don't have to do it because you're Hyde Park. And you don't have the capabilities until you update from Windows 95.
Are there any, well, this is a question for Anthea. I mean, is that equal protection or some, where in fact those customers would be, other customers would be adversely impacted? They would be taxed, and these small utilities.
We have like a
Would
low
not be
income
taxed.
charge that some utilities have to do and other utilities don't.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's voluntary?
No, well, we required the PUC to have an investigation, and the PUC has made a determination that like only GMP and others have started it. BD has one, I think, and BEC is working on it, but not all utilities are required to do it. But I don't know what the underlying law is for allowing that.
Right, and there it's this case GMP. I think it's just $1 on every customer's bill per month. What you're suggesting is a volumetric based charge, and what's the opportunity to sort of skirt around that, or say I don't have an EV, but in fact I do.
Right, so there's a technical problem, but I think that's what Senator Kitchell was asking at the end. I don't know if you know, this gets into a utility law about, is there a case to be made by some customers that we either get that benefit and others, we don't get it and they get it, or the other way, we have that cost and other customers don't have that cost.
We're getting taxed and you're not.
Yeah, that's not fair.
And I think that the organizations as VEPSA, brings these REIT members into their fold and all that the possibility of electric companies out there being a lot more in the dark ages than others are really kind of going by the wayside.
Well, we put additional money into VEPSA specifically to help them.
So we put 50 million in or something like that, 5 million or, yeah, I can't remember now. But anyway, I think that those dark ages of those electric companies are really kind of come to pass, and they're coming along nicely already. In a couple of years, we've already seen the technologies, the abilities, as Senator Pertwee has pointed out, as far as, and all of us have wished for, I think, in different times, that the electric companies play a bigger part in helping us get to our goals as far as collecting a tax. I think the technologies have gotten there a lot quicker than what we all thought they would be.
Okay. Anything else, either from senators or witnesses? Okay, if not, go ahead, Mr. Hunt.
I was just going to say nothing further from me.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your time, and we'll look forward to seeing you next year.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah. Is Mr. Howe, or, yeah, Mr. Burke, is he's already on. Okay, good. I assume he was doing it on Zoom. Hello, Mr. Burke. Welcome to the Senate Transportation Committee. We're going to be talking about S-256, and I think there's another bill that we have that also deals with veterans plates. So we wanted to have the Office of Veteran Affairs in to talk to us about these veteran plate issues. So you can introduce yourself for the record, and either we can open up for questions, or you can give us an intro for what you know about these requests on veteran license plates.
Sure. So I am Robert Burke, Director of Veterans Affairs for the state of Vermont. So for 256, I had a little back and forth yesterday with Anthea and Damien. I had initially recommended maybe some edits to the bill. And those are mainly focused because, you know, this was a companion to H71, which was really generated by a singular person. So when I looked at it more broadly, the wording is fine with me, and I support 256. For 264, I believe, is the other one. And I talked to Deputy Commissioner Smith from DMV. We are always in close contact. So I guess,
excuse me, just so we can make sure for the numbers, 256 is the bill that lists the different medals that could be listed on the plates. Oh, that's about who is a veteran.
Correct.
And the other one, 257.
256 is who is a veteran, 264 is what veteran plates are offered.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
264 is the list of the medals.
Yeah.
And
Right.
56 is just like who is a veteran. So the one of our questions was, you know, one, who gets to decide who is a veteran? How do we want to put that in the statute? And then the other one is what's your position on listing them all in there, or having it almost listing them all, listing some, or listing none in statute, and having it between you and DMV deciding on a one-by-one basis kind of thing.
Right. So that's for 264. And my thoughts is that I believe the system as it is set up right now is working fine. You know, in the past year, we added Air Medal and Bronze Star, and then we recently just added Bronze Star with the V symbol. So it means for valor. It means for during a combat action. So I think I'm of the opinion that the system is working fine right now. You know, because if you start listing them all, you know, now how many, you know, so Vermont has a Pearl Harbor survivor plate, you know, how many of those individuals, you know, are still alive, and are you going to have to continually kind of go in there and delete and then add more? I think the system, the way it is now, is working just fine. That's my opinion.
Do you see an issue? One of the things that the sponsor of the bill brought up was some medals are listed in statute and some aren't, and they felt it was giving those medals more weight in a way because they were actually listed in statute, even though you could get other license plates, but since they weren't listed in the statute, we were somehow kind of sliding them or not giving them the same weight as the other medals.
I just think listing none, it basically just as it's working now, that between DMV and myself, you know, we're working to add to that list. So you know, does listing one versus the other, I'm of the opinion that it doesn't give higher weight. I just prefer to, you know, see none of them listed, just, you know, leave it as, you know, it exists now that we work together. and if there's enough interest and there's funding there, then they get produced. I don't know how much it is to, to add another sticker to go on a veteran's plate, because aside from the flag plate, all the campaign plates, air medal, bronze, all of those, are just applied to an existing veteran series plate.
Because we could have language that just says DMV has the authority to work with the Office of Veteran Affairs to create veteran plates. And then really leave it up to both the Veterans Association or the office and the DMV to decide, and not have the legislature kind of dictating which medals, because you already have the authority to add a medal, whether it's listed or not.
Correct, and yeah, correct. And some that have been added were a result of a constituent's inquiry, to see if it would be possible. So,
right. And I had a constituent like that. And then, so back to 256, which I know is a specific issue around at what point do you become a veteran, like when you enter training, finish training. I think that's the issue that they're dealing in that bill. Did I hear you right that you supported the bill, or you'd also rather that just be done the way it is now, where DMV sends you the application and you decide if they're a veteran?
No, I'd like it. I like it the way that it's written now, right? Because there's a distinct difference between active duty and active duty for training, right? So your active duty for training time, if you then don't progress onto regular active duty, doesn't qualify you right now. This adds in and kind of lines up more with the Department of Veterans Affairs, where, a disability during active duty for training, whether that be boot camp or inactive duty for training, drill weekends, your 2-week, active duty for training, whenever your unit does it, it loops in that as a qualifier.
And that's what the situation was that brought the bill, was someone who was injured in training, and didn't meet the definition of veteran, which is a federal definition.
That's correct.
So this would, to accommodate this situation, would mean that we're creating additional eligibility criteria over and above what the federal definition is?
No, ma'am. So 38 USC 101, right, has numerous subparagraphs. The way the current legislation is written and the way that it's conveyed to us is that, it's active duty only, right? So it's paragraph 1 or subsection 1 of that federal law. So this is subparagraph 24. So it's all part of 38 USC 101.
Okay, well, I guess I was back to the situation that we had. The person never progressed to active duty.
Correct.
And therefore didn't meet the definition of veteran. And so wanted to create another path, because I guess the request got denied, right? And so that now it's come back asking us to expand or provide plates that would be outside the federal definition of veteran, which is what you determined.
Well, no, because as I said, that subparagraph 24 that talks about injury or disability, that is part of the federal statute. That is part of 38 US Code 101. So we're looping in another subparagraph of the federal definition. We're not creating a state definition. Some states do.
Okay, so you do support the S256? When you said as written, I thought you meant the existing statute, but you're saying you support 256.
Correct. I support 256 as it currently is written now.
Okay, all right,
And
thank you.
so, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but basically, why was it denied if there's already this federal statute? Why was the plate denied when it was requested?
Because of the current legislation and what's come through from DMV, it only called out subparagraph 1, right, which talks about active duty for training doesn't count, since 1982, there's a 24 continuous month requirement to be on active duty to meet that eligibility for the definition of a veteran. Now
Oh,
it
so
goes,
it's our law that's not consistent with the federal definition then.
So we need this to conform. Yes, so Counselor.
Whoever you are.
Yes, boss.
So it might help just to frame the existing statute says if a veteran as defined in 38 USC section 101 subdivision 2, and that definition is not broad enough to cover the person who was disabled during active military training. I'm gonna get all the nomenclature
Yeah,
wrong, but by adding in, and this is what's proposed in the bill, and including an individual disabled during active military, naval, air, or space service as defined in 38 USC section 101, same section, subdivision 24. So this individual does not meet the definition in paragraph 2, does meet the definition in paragraph 24.
So why don't we list all the paragraphs? Like what?
They're not all describing veterans.
Or why don't we just list, say, as per the 101 and not get into the, is there another instance where next year we have another individual that falls under paragraph 28 and then we have to add that?
That would not be a question for me, but I would say that there are way more definitions in section 101 than would ever be necessary to describe individuals who might be seeking, he's nodding, you can't see it, who might be seeking to be covered by the umbrella term of veteran for purposes of getting a DMV credential or a license plate.
So that, Mr. Burke, you feel like just mentioning that one paragraph of 25 or 27? 24, that's all we
Right.
do. There isn't another paragraph we should add in while we're at it.
no, I think 24 loops in that kind of currently missing category. What we will need to do is come up with a mechanism to decide, because your discharge, your DD 214, may not say you were discharged from active duty for training due to a disability or an injury. So we're going to have to meet up with some sort of paperwork from the federal VA to say, okay, this is a service-connected disability as a result of, time in service, whether it was a week, a day, 2 weeks on a drill weekend during 2-week active duty for training. So that's something that we will work out.
That examination and contact with the VA then is something your office does as part of responding to the DMV request. You would do that? DMV would not be doing that kind of
No.
information gathering.
No, and we don't work through, we don't have access to VA records, so we use, the applicant, the person applying would need to, provide eligibility proof that they do have a service-connected VA disability, or there is people get discharged and then receive benefits from the individual services, sometimes due to a disability. But again, there's a difference between that, difference between medical retirement. There's all sorts of subcategories. So.
Okay, that's helpful clarity for me on these two bills. At least, does anybody else? Did you have? I think I interrupted your original introduction. Did you have anything else you wanted to let us know?
Nope, not today.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Burke? Well, great. Thank you for your time and the emails and paying attention to this issue for us. That's very helpful.
I appreciate the time to give you my input.
Okay. Well, great. We'll be in touch if we need any more. If we change the wording, we'll send it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so that concludes the testimony that we had on these issues. We have on our calendar some time to talk to Anthea about the miscellaneous DMV bill.
Could we go back to Mike on just what we've got?
Yeah.
So in light of the testimony from Mr. Burke, to add that other paragraph, that's acceptable to you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's what's stopping him from signing the form and sending it back to us.
It's our statute. I thought it was the federal definition of veteran, but, which obviously has been clarified. So, so perhaps we could just fold that into the DMV bill then.
Yeah,
But then the other question is, shall we start adding silver plate? And that's S-264, but that we can talk about more. But I just thought if we could get this one sort of closed out.
yeah, I think we can talk about both of them and then some of the other issues that we've talked about adding into the DMV bill, because just so the committee knows, I can't remember if we talked about this yesterday, that by rule that this is a committee bill, it needs to be out by next Tuesday. I've already let the pro tem know that we probably won't meet that date, but if we can, it would be good to vote out by Friday, which I think is possible.
Yeah.
Once we get into some questions about language, but you raised your hand.
Oh, I was just gonna say that based on the testimony that you just had and the phrasing about the sort of lack of applicability for one of the plates that's listed in statute, the Pearl Harbor survivor plate, would it be helpful for the committee to see language that basically says, DMV, you still have the authority to make veteran plates, consult with the Office of Veterans Affairs, and don't list anything? Would you like to see that as like an alternative to current statute and what's proposed in S-264? Because that's really easy for me to.
I mean, that seems to me to be a way to go, and I don't want to be seen as taking away some value of metals by just saying any metal, but on the other hand, I think that makes the statute cleaner and easier for DMV and the Office of Veterans Affairs, because it's really not giving DMV any power other than to ask the Office of Veterans Affairs, which metals should be on the plate. And I can't imagine the Office of Veterans Affairs is going to say some metal doesn't warrant a license plate, right? Because right now the practice has been every metal that has been requested has been issued a plate.
I was gonna say, I have not seen one denied yet, so.
So under the statute as it exists now, the DMV only needs to consult with the Office of Veterans Affairs for an American flag or veteran or military related emblems selected piece, but they don't need to consult in terms of like the types of plates that are offered. So I think that is the DMV doing it out of, respect for a sister agency.
Right.
If you put that in statute, you could sort of say like it's a trade, like we're not listing all the plates, but we're telling you to continue doing what you're doing, which is talk to the people who actually know about the different metals that are there.
Right, require their approval. So what does the committee think of that approach?
Yeah, I'm good with anything that's clean like that, I am.
I always like wording that doesn't require,
Right, come back,
coming back in a very potentially dynamic area where you could maybe have another, well, we're up to Afghanistan, but who knows what else might happen.
Right, unfortunately.
So I like that flexibility without revisiting and making a statutory change.
My only question for the DMV, or I think my only remaining question is the form that you have people fill out. Right now, the form has metals listed. How would you deal with that? Would you continue to list some that are just the more common ones, or would you just say, let us know which metal you received kind of thing? Or
So to me, the form would list all the ones that we are currently issuing, so we would always keep that updated for the total list of
You
everything.
have other on that list?
Excuse me, no.
Maybe you should.
No, but and that's actually, it's funny, but it's actually not.
Right. Well, I think you kind of
Add an other, and if something that you have is not listed here, please reach out to the department.
Right.
Because I don't know all of the metals that are out there.
Right, and I think that's what Senator Weeks was saying, there's like hundreds of these, so you couldn't list all of them, so, but you list the ones that have been issued, but just have something on the form that says, and we don't need that statute, I don't think, but where the form gives the Vermonter a chance to
Request something.
request a new plate that isn't listed.
I think if you wanted to, you could put it in session law that they need to update their form, but it sounds like they're gonna do that
Right.
I don't think
We
we
don't
need
need to be
to start.
But you can if you'd like. A little version.
Right.
It seemed like,
Our intent is clear.
for Senator Weeks, he really was trying to focus on combat.
Yeah, he
And
wanted.
I'm
to
wondering,
comment
yeah, combat, because somehow people who actually have been in combat and have their lives at risk somehow deserve some recognition over someone who might have been, at a desk job in the Pentagon, for example.
Mhm.
And they're not a whole, I can't remember the percentage, but it was a relatively small percentage of veterans who actually served in combat arena. So I don't know whether we could address maybe that concern about valuing or respecting by having something to do with combat theaters.
But what would you do, like list the combat?
No, but, in that flexibility, could we do something that would give some recognition to the value of combat veterans? That, because that's really, we're not sure out into the future, that we would have other theaters.
So I know you don't love findings, but how would you feel about a section before the amendments that said it is the intent of the General Assembly that there be flexibility to the Department of Motor Vehicles and the Office of Veterans Affairs to choose the veteran plates that shall be offered with specific attention being paid to honoring those who have served in combat. So you're explaining why it is that you're taking out Pearl Harbor survivors in your intent in a way that would be respectful to the fact that there are people who.
Well, that's what I'm trying to search is how to do that.
I think if you don't want to stick in like all the theaters into statute, if you don't want to say at a minimum you need to offer plates for theaters, which is getting back to where current statute is, which might be why Pearl Harbor survivors were listed to show respect for that, then maybe you just include it in legislative intent. It'll be session law. It can be printed in the notes of the Green Book, so it's there as this like notice of the sort of reason why you went in the direction of not listing.
Can we also include the mention of the form having an option to request?
You could say that it is also the intent of the General Assembly that to ensure flexibility and recognition of future medals or of medals that are not currently offered, that the Department of Motor Vehicles allow for the solicitation.
We could do something like that. It seems like that would help address some of the thinking behind.
Because right now there isn't a combat plate. But I guess if you're in one of the.
Bronze with valor probably.
Well, yeah, you would know by the medal if you know what the medals mean, but I didn't know. And I assume when you're serving in if you have one like an Iraq plate or an Afghanistan plate, then you were at least in a combat zone.
Does it indicate Vietnam? It does.
Vietnam.
That's what I thought.
So as someone who doesn't have a great understanding of all of the medals, whenever I see a plate that I haven't seen before, I usually go to the Department of Motor Vehicles website because they have a picture of every single plate and you can sort of see what the emblem is.
So they describe it to you.
There's a little description, like there's the name of what the plate is, but I mean, again, you'd be bogging down your bill. You could tell them to update their website to include them.
I think
Because
just if we have some findings to explain why we're doing this and making it kind of easier for veterans in the future to get the recognition they deserve, I think that's.
In a more timely way,
Right, in a more timely way. We don't want to have somebody say like, oh, you have to wait till the next legislature comes around.
right.
So there should.
With the findings, is it better to keep this as a separate bill than to pull it into DMV miscellaneous?
I was gonna do it as a legislative intent section, but I will say that you're gonna be in a situation where you're gonna have like statute change, statute change, statute change, explanation for next statute change, like statute change, and then like continuing on. So it's gonna look a little weird to have this like one section of legislative intent in the middle of your bill. So if you wanna do it as like a standalone bill, you have the vehicle, it's been introduced, you could just do it in this amendment.
And we could amend to hook those two bills together,
Yeah, so
256 and 264.
What you could do is you could amend either one of them to be your veterans bill, and you could have it make the changes in 256 as is, and then take 264, strip out the listing of the plates, include legislative intent, and give the discretion to the DMV, but requires a consultation with the Office of Veterans Affairs, and move that as one bill.
So in your negotiations with the House, do you see any reason that it's better to have it on the DMV miscellaneous bill to make sure this goes through as opposed to a separate bill?
Doesn't guarantee that it goes through, the miscellaneous DMV bill is not passed, so it's, people think that they're gonna go through, so they add things onto them that are controversial, so. I don't know if it matters, I mean, sometimes bills that, might kind of, because it's not a critical issue, kind of get lost in the shuffle, and so putting in DMV helps that, but on the other hand, you don't want it to get maybe mixed up in the DMV bill, and just having as a clean bill, just dealing with veteran plates, I think people would think is a priority and just kind of move separately.
I would argue, let's move a separate bill that combines the both.
Then my recommendation would be to pick 256, because that's the defining veterans one, because that bill happens to have a companion bill in the House. So you can say, like, this is a bill that's like a member in your body has introduced, yes, it's incorporating this other bill, but when I tell them,
Yeah.
this bill is moving in the Senate, it's identical to your H-71, but it also includes this other piece related to veterans. I just think it will be easier for House members who are maybe getting told by their constituents, hey, you really need to focus on H-71
Right.
if it's the sister bill, the companion bill.
Okay, I think let's move it as a separate 256, incorporate that language to 264, and the findings as discussed. And we won't include that in the miscellaneous.
I will have that amendment
And
for Tuesday.
the agency, the Department of Motor Vehicles has no problem with that.
I'll send them the legislative intent language to make sure.
Okay, will you send it to Mr. Burke?
Yeah.
Okay. We succeeded in that, and we could work next week to pass that bill out. Because I don't know, it's not a committee bill, it's just our amendment to S-256. Okay. Other issues on this miscellaneous DMV bill?
Well, we could, once Anthea gets us back, we could vote this out Tuesday.
Yeah, we can vote it up.
Yeah, my plan is to do this today, to send it to the DMV and Office of Veterans Affairs to look at over the weekend, and then if they don't have any edits that are significant, to have it for you for Tuesday morning.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
So Megan, as we work on the agenda for next week, doing committee discussion and vote on S-256 as early as Tuesday. If Anthea has time to come in and go over it. We are going to try to hear some more testimony on the tinted front windows, like from an inspection station and an agent in a business that does tinted windows, just to close the loop on that, because those were two other voices that we wanted to hear, but wanted to check with the committee about adding that to the DMV bill or where we are. I thought the testimony from law enforcement was pretty compelling that it should be pass-fail for inspection.
For the passenger.
Just right, for the front passenger.
Front
The only issue I think that's
driver.
a little difficult is the level of tint. Is it like you can't have any aftermarket tint? And then on this side, I was thinking of sending you an email that I didn't get to, is like, can you think, and I don't know if other states have dealt with this, is it seems like it would be difficult to say you can't have any, but we could do that and just say you need a doctor's letter to get any, and then, or if we say 30%, do we get into an issue of like who's to decide what 30% looks like? Is it up to the discretion of the officer, where they just can say, I think it's more than 30%? Do they go to the Judicial Bureau and say, actually it's 29%, and then we get an argument whether it's 29 or 31 in the Judicial Bureau hearing?
Do we have any standard, I mean, obviously manufacturers are tinting, and that's basically,
Yeah.
we just link the tinting standard for aftermarket
Right.
to the same
You
as.
can, but it's still, you're still.
I know you've still got the issue, but you're only gonna pick up the egregious cases anyway.
If the federal standard is no more than 30%, if I remember.
So maybe that would be easier.
So the way your statute is written currently, and this is why it's catching the aftermarket tint but letting through the manufacturer tint, is that the language in statute says material or items that have been painted or adhered on or over or hung in back of any transparent part of a motor vehicle windshield, but it's not talking about tinting that's within the glass itself. So I think where I'm hearing you is you want to leave alone what manufacturers are doing because they need to comply with the federal requirements. And then you would want to allow in Vermont aftermarket tint up to whatever the federal threshold is. So my question for you would then be one of, are you making life too complicated for such a narrow band of vehicles? Because for how long have manufacturers been tinting to the federal piece? So are you in a position where the vehicles that are out on the road are having that up to 30%?
We're only talking about the aftermarket.
What I'm saying is if people are not, if there is no need to aftermarket tint to hit 30%, I think it's the 70 total transmission level or whatever it's called. If you don't need aftermarket tint to hit that point, and all aftermarket tint is to go with less visible light transmission, I don't know, that might be a question for the witnesses that you have, then you don't need to like address it. Because if, and I mean, maybe Deputy Commissioner Smith knows, do all vehicles that are sold now have tinting in the glass that is at that 70% level?
I do not.
I assume not, but that's a good question. I'm sure. Center angles?
But then you're in a position where someone's.
I would get it as narrow as we can and get it to the point of if the vehicle has factory tint, that it's legal, no matter what level that it's at. If it comes from the factory and it came that way, I mean, they have vetted every possibility to be sued in any different ways that they could. So we're safe in that way. And if at that point in time, somebody chooses to go with an aftermarket tint above and beyond what came with the factory level, then that is where we make that determination of what's too much or what's too dark or whatever. I don't know where that level is. I do know at one time that it used to be that vehicles that didn't have air conditioning didn't have any tint at all. And then once they started doing air conditioning, they started adding tint to them. And but I would say that anything came from the factory that had a tint in it would probably be legal in the standards. And then after that fact, we got to find the level where it causes us heartburn.
So if we set the manufactured tinting aside and say that,
Right. That's it.
The question then becomes, what do we do with the aftermarket tint? And what is the threshold of permissibility?
And I thought at one time and Mike, maybe you don't know or remember, maybe you do remember, I thought at one time there actually was a gauge that would check that density of the tint, but maybe I just thought I remembered that. I do not know.
Well, and we did send a request to talk to Captain Davidson about all these things, so we'll hear from somebody that deals specifically with all the inspection issues. So we'll hear from that. That's another witness that we'll have. But I think for now, what I think would best to do is just say, just reference the federal rules. So there could be, so Senator Kitchell wants to take her 72 Capri or whatever it is and put tint on it. You could do it, but it'd have to be no more than the 30%.
Right.
So I think that's easy. We might get into a question about somebody arguing whether it's 30 or not, but we'll leave that for another day.
So I think what you want to do then, if we're looking at 279, is not add the prohibition on the sale or lease of motor vehicles with tinted windows. So not put anything at the dealer level.
Yeah.
Do not require rulemaking to update administrative penalties for dealers that do. Instead, just focus on existing statute and make the sort of technical correction updates. And then for your prohibition on material or items that are on it, say that they're prohibited if they exceed the corresponding standard for in-glass tinting
Just reference
as
that.
regulated
Here's the-
under,
Yeah.
So here's two more questions.
Then we have to add but you failed the inspection.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then for the other piece from 279 that would stay is the legislative intent, that the safety inspection would fail if you don't meet the standards in 1125 as amended. And then the rulemaking update, this says it's not later than January 1 of 2025. And it sounds like you probably want to give the DMV more time than that, so you can make it July 1, 2025.
Well, we can hear from the DMV, but I'm open to a different time. But then there's also, do we need anything in statute about outreach to the tinting companies, and outreach to the inspection? I mean, we're already gonna have outreach to the inspection.
It's already illegal.
Right. Yeah, so do we need to put anything in the statute about that? I assume not, but we could maybe say something about a public education campaign. Because Senator Ingles pointed, we don't want to catch somebody that was okay one day and the next day like getting a ticket. So how do we let the public know, those people that have this tint, you know, the witness that we had the other day, if they're still driving that vehicle, do they get a ticket, or do they have to pay the $200 to get it taken off? That kind of, and then talking to have the tinting companies, and we'll talk to a tinting company, but maybe they just got to change their sign to say, we'll put this on for you, but you're not going to pass inspection. So maybe you're on your way to Florida, you get it done here.
And they might know a lot more about it than
Yeah.
we
We
just
have to have
know.
testimony.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to schedule that.
So what you could do is, I wouldn't suggest putting anything in codified law telling, like dictating an outreach campaign, but you do have as a model, what it was included in the bill with the car seat language and how that has a public outreach campaign that the Vermont Department of Health needs to do, where they need to like make materials available.
Right.
Obviously, that is a different situation because there is already, I think it's bseatsmart.org that's maintained, the Department of Health is already like providing seats, but I do know that the DMV does issue like inspection bulletins, and they're going to need to update their AVIP software. So it could be that there is a level of dictated public outreach that is not going to deviate too much from what the department would already be doing, and would be a means for providing education to people and to like companies that are putting on aftermarket tint and inspection stations. And I can certainly work with the DMV if you want to tell me to write something that requires outreach, but outreach is not going to be terrible.
And maybe DMV can testify in the future about dates that they feel comfortable with for several, if we're going to do other things, like if we're going to make changes to the veterans plates in that bill, if we're going to make changes to the window tinting, what is it? July 25, what date is a date that allows the red things, the car seats, we're gonna, I think people seem supportive of adding that. We have testimony, this is just other things for DMV. We have testimony about fraudulent airbags, which I think people have heard about. Council has drafted some language that we haven't seen yet, but we're hoping to do that next week. I assume it's not controversial. I think DMV and AOT is supportive of that. Has AOT, Mr. Boomhauer, seen that about the fraudulent airbags? Have you seen anything about that? This is the manufacturers we're worried about.
Yeah, I kind of feel like this would be a DMV matter. This is not something I'm following.
So we did get some, there's two questions that were asked. I think Bridget Morris had provided some
Right.
responses to that in regards to the whole issue of airbags. And there's no like commercial resale of them, they're either salvage or they're rid.
Right. Okay.
I can send the drafted language to the DMV.
Okay, that would be great.
But I guess I just want to be careful about who come up with the word fraudulent. Is it the automobile manufacturers that are just nervous about not going with OEM parts, or is there an actual, is there an actual fraudulent and non-performing airbag out there that could cause damage? Because there's nothing wrong with competition as long as they're adhering to all the standards of where it is. So I'd be nervous about where that word fraudulent come from.
I think
Because
we
it
need
could be-
testimony on that.
We would definitely, yeah.
Cause I know Bridget had come up and talked to me about that and oh yeah, fraudulent, well, okay, well, where's, what's fraudulent? What, you know, is it just an aftermarket airbag that's gonna conform to all their specifications of what we require an airbag to do?
The problem is.
Right. Right.
Normally you
So-
get a recall and you
Right.
take your car back and the,
Well, this is like after the airbag, let's say you were in a small crash and the
Yeah.
airbag deployed, so you need a new airbag put in. The manufacturers, what I think with the dealers, as a former dealer, was to say like, well, we want to get a cheaper one in, but as long as it meets the federal requirements, I think the manufacturer's like, no, you have to put in a Honda
Right.
airbag, not some
And that
other.
whole industry set on aftermarket parts. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's just the way it is. Even the dealers rely on aftermarket parts to be able to make more profit. So that's where my concern is gonna be, Chair,
Yeah,
as to, is it a fraudulent airbag, or is it just an aftermarket part that adheres to everything else, and then we can
doesn't
all be.
represent a safety issue.
Right, exactly. I mean, if it's a safety issue, I'm gonna be nervous.
right. And there has been, at least from what I heard, that there has been instances of non-operating airbags that do more damage. They don't, you know, they cause injury, they don't help prevent injury. So I haven't really looked at the language either. I know Anthea has looked at it, but so we'll get
Who's requested the language?
the manufacturers through their lobbyists.
Okay, but Anthea's not drafting language from the lobbyists.
They
Senator
said,
Mazza?
So I was asked to work on the language. I think it will be very clear that it is, you know, something that they would like to move forward. Part of the reason why I drafted it was just with my immediate departure, trying to get as much work done as possible. But yes, this is something that is 100% being proposed by the lobbyists. I think it would be helpful when they come in just to sort of be on the same page in terms of the phrasing that's being used. They're not using fraudulent, they're defining counterfeit. Counterfeit automobile supplemental restraint system component, and they talk about there being the trademark and non-functional airbag, which is designed as like one that has faults to it. So fraudulent is not being used.
So
And
how do we enforce this?
So the language would actually be going into Title 13, not Title 23. That's where it is a crime to have like a non-functioning
So it's more of a
airbag.
consumer protection?
It's not in Title 23. The language has never been in Title 23. It's been in Title 13 since it was added in 2002. My coworker Michelle, who staffs Judiciary Matters and worked on the language when it was added in 2002, has looked at it. But you know, you could be in a position where this isn't Title 23 language. Maybe someone else needs to look it up.
this is more about the crime.
Right.
And nothing is changing about the penalties there. They are currently imprisonment for not more than 15 years or fined not more than $10,000 and imprisoned for not more than 3 years and fined not more than $10,000. And it depends on whether or not death results.
Well, that definitely is judiciary.
Right, yeah, it seems like it. So we could do two things. We could hear the testimony from the manufacturers on what they're saying is the problem that needs to be solved. And we could either put it in the DMV bill or send them over to judiciary and say, you need to talk to folks on judiciary. We can, but I was willing to at least hear their
Yeah,
argument.
Before we decide what route it should take.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
But who's installing and who, I don't even have a sense of,
That's what makes me nervous about it is that there's other people out there. I mean, if
would
they.
local garages be installing? I have a good
Well, we used to
repair
be awful
garage.
nervous about, you know, doing something wrong when it death resulting. And you want to get yourself in trouble, you do something that you know is not right and it could be death resulting. It's pretty.
And do we actually, has this been from the public safety? Do we have data that in fact this has been happening in Vermont, that we've had? No.
I got the understanding that they're going across the country trying to update statutes to deal with this. So we'll have to take some testimony to see what level of a
Is this
problem.
more
it is.
preemptive than responding to some situations that have actually occurred here in the state? I don't know.
It seems to be funny. It's well down the road, but never even have come in any of these rooms, you know, they seem to have it all determined. that is the direction of where it's gonna be. So it's picked up steam someplace.
Yeah, and they did talk to the chair before the session, and he was supportive of getting the language, at least bring it in to have a discussion about it. So we're just following through on that, but we're not promising that, that we're passing it or that we'll put it in the bill. And because we have existing language, this is altering existing statute.
Yeah, so you currently, no person shall knowingly basically reinstall or install an object in lieu of a vehicle airbag that was designed in accordance with the federal safety regulations. So that's the current law. You cannot install it if it does not meet federal safety standards. This is having more elaboration there as to,
Details. Okay.
I mean, the sorts of things that might not meet those safety standards.
Okay.
But I do not think on its face, if there was an aftermarket part that was not putting any kind of indicator on it as to being like a Honda or a Toyota or whatever airbag, and it was a functional airbag that didn't fall under the definition of non-functional airbag, then it would not be something that was prohibited. But I do not know enough about the federal standards, what the
Come on, Isaiah, you should know all the federal standards on
for airbags, or like what it is
Who
that,
sets those, NIST?
not this,
No, I know.
the one that sounds sort of like NIST but has the H in it, the National Highway Safety.
Yeah.
But there also is the piece of, you don't know like what the depth of the market is
Right.
for aftermarket airbags. Maybe they're all non-functional and that's sort of part of the issue.
Okay, and we'll have the dealers in if we decide to move forward.
Unfathomable that we're something that's by design non-functional.
Well, my understanding is it's like a counterfeit. They sell these knowing that they don't work. And they're like, hey, you could buy one for 2,000, I'll sell you one for 500, but it works fine, and then it doesn't. But
But it has the trademark on it. So
Right,
that's
they-
part of the definition of counterfeit is that it has the trademark.
They're passing it off as a fully conforming airbag, but it's not. So we will try to get that testimony next week as well. Our perennial issue about rotor rust. And if we're going to require DMV to look at the inspection manual and maybe make some changes, I thought we would look at a couple other things that in the past that we've talked about and sometimes have not done because like, why have DMV change the manual for one little thing? But if we're gonna have one thing, maybe we could have a couple other things, and that would be this language about rotor rust.
Yeah.
If it's not slowing, it's actually not affecting braking distance, then it doesn't need to fail. There's wording that we can do, so we're gonna have the same testimony we had before, I hope, and have to, I forgot your constituents, off church and things like that. So let's see if we can add that, because I think we have some language from Pennsylvania, try to improve that, because we all hear it from our constituents, and it's a real cost that is a barrier, I think, to folks.
Rep Simmons come up to me just yesterday and just said that they needed to buy a truck, bought one from New Hampshire, all inspected and it's a nice vehicle, came over. And I gotta be careful about what is all inspected, but bought a nice truck, brought it over and then it needed $1,500 worth of brake work because of rusty rotors and all that. So, again, don't know the whole story. I'm sure I didn't get the whole story, but
It puts the customer, the Vermonter, in a difficult position because they're saying, you can't, your car needs to be inspected. If you drive it away uninspected, even though there's some time to fix it in the inspection process, you're basically going to be illegally driving an uninspected vehicle. Or you could give me $1,200 and I'll fix it so you could be inspected.
well, that's what it was. I guess now thinking of the story, it was inspected in New Hampshire. They brought it over to get inspected in Vermont, get a sticker on it, and it was just freshly inspected in New Hampshire. When they sold it, they came over here, then it needed $1,500 worth of work on the brake.
And sometimes it's $600, but it's still, it's like
Right.
people feel like, well, okay, I'll just pay the $600 because I want my car inspected. I don't want to deal with it, but they might have just had to go drive around and do some heavy braking for a while and it would pass inspection. So that's that issue. The other issue is the language that we passed last year requiring the federal required stamp on the motorcycle mufflers. So all motorcycles manufactured in the United States require that the muffler have the stamp to show that the muffler meets the federal requirements. So last year we had passed language that said that needs to be part of the, we weren't going to say it fails inspection, we were just going to put it in there to say that all Vermont motorcycles need to have that stamp, right? We didn't say it was going to be fail inspection, we were just going to put it in language. The House took it out because of the noise study and said, oh, let's deal with it during that. I would just like to revisit that discussion. I think the noise study is about everything. Since this is already a federal regulation, I think it's a responsible, easy thing to do, just to say, you need to have a stamp. So what it would prevent though would be somebody that has a motorcycle where they take the manufacturer's muffler off and put on a muffler that's
Just about takes your ears off.
which could take your ears off. I mean, I guess there's technically somebody could put an aftermarket motor muffler on that's quieter, but that doesn't seem to be as trend. So it would be talking about that issue.
Yeah, so I can include that language. The one thing I would just flag is, in looking at the language again, because it was modeled off of a bill from New York, it said, it used the phrase operated or driven, which struck me as odd this morning. And I looked at our definition of operate and it includes to drive. So I would like to take out the or driven. If you're gonna
Okay.
include the language.
Yeah, because it's really just about the inspection.
Well, I'm just saying more like it's, you accomplish the goal without using the or driven phrasing, setting aside the policy goal
Just because
of
it's
putting it.
confusing.
Well, just because it's unnecessary, given the definition of operate in
Right.
section 4,
Right.
subdivision 24.
Right, no.
Always a problem when you copy laws for another state, they use different words. But yeah, I'll take out or driven and I'll have it ready if you want to include it anywhere and you can make the policy decision. But I will just add that it's every motorcycle manufactured after December 31st, 1985. So it's not every motorcycle, it's got that line in the stamp
Right.
on it.
Right, which is helpful because I think I heard from somebody said like, well, I have an old
Yeah.
vehicle.
Indian or something.
Right.
And so it wouldn't apply. to
What
that.
year was it again?
December 31st, 1985. And it's US EPA required labeling requirements. They're in the Code of Federal Regulations.
Okay. And then, so that would be the miscellaneous, plus the existing stuff. The only other thing that I just had a question for EMB, if you want to say anything about the front license plates, I've been getting a lot of comments, sometimes from the same people, just like, hey, what if the front license plate seems to be going away? Like they see more and more vehicles with that, and I would agree. I see more and more vehicles without a front license plate. I was at a charging station the other day and there was 4 Rivian vehicles registered in Vermont. None of them have a front license plate because it looks like Rivian doesn't manufacture the vehicle with the holes in the front or a way to easily attach it. So it's kind of like
And some sports cars have that
I
same.
was just saying, apparently Corvettes.
the Corvettes don't have that either.
And
So
Tesla's also done them.
yeah, so people often don't. I mean, I don't know if you could do it with magnets or some other way, but they don't want to drill holes in their brand new vehicle that they just spent thousands of dollars with. So I don't know if that is something that DMV, I know it's within the commissioner's purview or the commissioner's,
We've tried
Not
doing that, this
responsibility.
committee actually.
well, we've just talked about it, but I didn't.
No, you're, so
Oh, you
with the
did?
Vermont strong license plates, when it was extended to allow them indefinitely, there was a study that required reporting back on like what the cost savings would be.
Oh, that.
And then there have been bills introduced over the years that
And
would
we actually
eliminate.
did it and assumed the savings and then it didn't happen.
But the savings wasn't that high.
No, it was like 180,000 or something.
But so right now, the commissioner can decide whether the front plate is required or not. Is that correct?
That is my understanding.
It's not like on an individual, like you don't have to have a license plate, but you do. But it's just in general, the person that is the DMV commissioner has the ability to say Vermonters do or do not have to have them. But as far as an officer, I guess the officer would have the same ability to make a decision, but it is illegal not to have a front license plate. So you could get a ticket not driving with a front license.
Much like with the Vermont Strong plates, the statute says that you will have your other plate behind it,
Yeah.
otherwise it's not legal. So I'd like to say, no, I don't want to speak to that.
Law enforcement has been adamant about the importance of the front plate in
Right.
past testimony, so.
And it's been mostly from people that are pedestrians or bicyclists that feel like that other way to identify the vehicle if there's a problem or
They like the front plate for that
Yeah.
reason.
just be able to see it. And then often the back license plate does get covered with dirt and snow. And I mean, that can happen to the front license plate. At least on my vehicle, usually the front plate is clean and the back plate gets dirty on a dirt road.
So you know what the statute says. It says a motor vehicle operated on any highway shall have displayed in a conspicuous place either 1 or 2 number plates as the commissioner may require. So commissioner may require.
1 or 2.
1 or 2.
They can't say there's none.
Yeah.
Or 3.
1 or 2.
Okay. Center Chittenden.
You could give more flexibility as the commissioner may require, plates or no plates.
Okay.
So it's not clear in this conversation if it is illegal to not have a front plate. So how do they know if a car doesn't have a front plate if the commissioner gave permission for that?
It's sort of not meant to be, as I understand the statute and it's been interpreted by the DMV to say, like, you, Senator Purchase, don't need to have a front license plate, but you, Senator Chittenden, you do need to. It's more motorcycles don't have front plates. Trailers don't have front plates. Cars have front plates. And then when you've got the statutes that have been put in place for the commemorative plates, like the bicentennial plate, the Vermont Strong plate in its original iteration, they had a limited allowance for how long they were allowed to be displayed. So if you go back to the original statute the original session law that created the Vermont Strong license plate, it said, like all of the other commemorative license plate statutes, you need to put this license plate on top of your existing license plate. Was that so someone could look under it? Maybe. Was it so that, in 2 years when you needed to remove it, you removed it and poof, your license plate was still there, you hadn't lost it? Was it to prevent people from taking that license plate and giving it to someone else so that they didn't need to have a license plate? But then when the Vermont Strong license plate had its time duration lifted, it was an amendment to session law to say this plate can be displayed indefinitely. It kept but it needs to be on top of the license plate piece. That prompted the report into what the cost savings would be. And now we're in a situation where the commissioner may require 1 or 2 plates. The commissioner is requiring 2 plates on vehicles. Session law says that if you have a Vermont Strong license plate, it can go on top of your front plate, but the front plate needs to be there. And lots of people don't have front plates. It's probably not being enforced. I think that's the lay of the land at the moment.
And when the commissioner makes this determination, is it a written determination?
I think the commissioner is just issuing 2 license plates to cars and not 2 license plates to motorcycles.
I believe it's an administrative rule, where it talks about the number of plates that will be issued for various. It also talks about the size of the plates.
The size of plates are in statute.
Is that?
So the commissioner issues an order of that, like license plates are required or not required for motorcycles and trailers. Is it an order or just you create a rule and in that rule it says they're required?
Like in the rule, and I'm going from memory because I didn't I believe the rule speaks to what vehicles will have 2 plates and what vehicles will have 1 plate.
Okay.
Clearly motorcycle, there's no place on the front to put it, but I guess you could argue that's the same as a Tesla.
Right. But that's in the rule, so the DMV, when they went through the rulemaking process, had that written down. I just wondered, kind of Senator Chittendon's question, how would an officer know? Did the commissioner decide that they're not allowed now or not? Like, where would they look that up?
I would imagine that rule was probably written way before I even started there 30-some years ago. So, and other than historically, we just issue 2 plates for cars and trucks, right? 1 for trailers, 1 for motorcycles, ATVs. Other than common knowledge, I don't know how you would know.
It is in the rule.
It is in the rule.
It's in the rule. So section 4 of the DMV rule number 16, registration plates, says 2 registration plates are issued to and must be displayed by all registered vehicles except for the following types of vehicles for which 1 plate is issued. These are the ones that are only 1 plate. Trailers, new car dealers, finance car dealers, farm machinery dealers,
What's that,
trailer
finance car
dealers.
dealers? What was the finance card?
finance car dealers. Trailer dealers, all-terrain vehicle dealers, motorcycles, ATVs, antique vehicles, contractors' trailers, used car dealers, auction car dealers, highway building equipment dealers, motorcycle moped dealers, transporters, mopeds, exhibition vehicles, and then there's a typo in the statute because it says zone, and I don't know what that means.
But you don't have your all surface vehicles. You need to issue them two.
So that would actually be an ATV and a motorboat, so they fall under there. And zone registrations actually got repealed years ago, because there was a zone registration.
Well, then you should go through the rulemaking process to update your rules. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's interesting. Okay. I just wanted to bring it up because constituents bring it up. I just wanted to refresh my memory on that discussion. Okay, anything else about the DMV bill?
We're loading it up. Can we put the inspection sticker on the right-hand side of the window? I'm always asking why we put it on the left side.
I think the testimony from the commissioner was the law enforcement wanted it up.
It's like so rare. It's like that this is obstructing the view.
Is it obstructing?
I don't know. It's really distracting for me. It's just right down there when I'm.
I never noticed. Maybe it's different vehicles. My vehicle.
I don't.
You need to raise your seat. You can't be like those kids in the hallway fat like that.
It's not just me, other residents, constituents, that just say, why is it in front of the driver's side when the passenger side is much less in the way?
Right, yeah, maybe some vehicles, but, or maybe where their inspection station places it, like, you don't want to obstruct the VIN number, which is also on that side, I think always, but maybe some cars, I don't know if that's always on that side.
I just think it makes more sense on the passenger side. Never mind, just.
Find a law enforcement officer that wants to come and try. Okay, any other, we could go on break for 10 minutes, and so at 10:45, we're gonna we'll start our discussion about automated traffic law enforcement, so speed cameras, otherwise known as.